I made the decision to do that on my own from day one, which I think I've always had that in me to do, but it's just, did I have the skills? But you would never have the skills when you go off on your own. You never have them fully formed. You just need to have a little bit more of a plan than probably I did, which was, wouldn't it be a laugh to start a studio?
Hello and welcome to Creativity for Sale podcast, a show to help you start and grow your life-changing creative career and business. My name is Radim Malinic and creativity changed my life. You see, I believe creativity can change your life too. I even wrote a book about it and it inspired this podcast. I've set out to interview the world's most brilliant creatives, designers, writers, musicians, makers and marketeers about their life-changing experiences with creativity. If you ever wanted to know how people go from their humble beginnings to the pinnacle of their success, our conversation should provide you with an intimate look into triumphs, challenges, and untold stories behind their creative endeavors. We also discuss the highs and lows of creative careers and creative life. So, thank you for joining me on this exploration of passion, creativity, innovation, and the boundless potential within us all. Let creativity change your life. Are you ready? Welcome to the first episode. For more than a decade and a half, my guest has been exploring creativity through graphic design, typography, illustration, and even product design with exceptional results. Through his commercial work, he partners with global clients, agencies on branding and strategy, delivering new brands, brand refreshes, and new ways to experience a brand. To talk about his work and his latest explorations of art and painting, it's my pleasure to introduce my friend Kyle Wilkinson. Hi, Kyle, and welcome to Creativity for Sale podcast. So I want to start with a question, which is, do you remember your first paid piece of creative work?
I do. It would have been for an entertainment company. We luckily managed to bag one of these scare attractions. I said luckily. We had to then go to the scare attraction, which were absolutely terrifying. But it was for an entertainment company who put on those scare events at Halloween, and we had to create their identity for it. So it was quite a fun project.
So I'm picking up on the fact that that's not like a freelance piece of work. So it was a part of a studio.
Are you talking about full-time positions? Or are you talking about work?
It's up to you. I mean, I remember my first freelance piece of work that I did, and I'm proud and disappointed in the same way.
Oh, yeah. As we all are, I think, with those. We look back. I mean, you go through those first few years thinking, what the bloody hell is that? And then you look back on it after a few more years with probably a little bit more rose-tinted glasses. My first job was in publishing, which that was the first time I earned any money from doing design. So I worked for a local paper around here, doing little ads, column-sized ads. Ads were measured in column widths. I don't know if that still happens in newspapers, but that were interesting.
I absolutely admire that you could do that. I once actually, when I was a bit lost, when I realized my freelancing wasn't working, so I was fishing for a job, and I nearly got a job in like sort of local advertising gazette, and they wanted me to do a test, and luckily I failed spectacularly. I couldn't design a fake ad.
I managed to wing it because they invited me in for an interview, making out that they poached me. I went for a job, and they asked me to do a test in Quark. I'd never heard of Quark, didn't know what it were. I've always been an Adobe boy. And I just said, yeah, I can use Quark. Never heard of it. And winged it, managed to do an ad, and they offered me the job there. And yeah, it was quite soul destroying, to be honest. But I learned an awful lot, which is what you're supposed to do in them first positions, which is quite good.
I think it's the key of starting in a creative position and looking after your career and like looking after your fortunes. An answer to every question that you got absolutely no idea what the answer is. Like, can you do it? Of course I can. Of course. Yeah. What is it?
You've got to develop that mindset. You've got to develop that mindset that you can figure these things out. You've got the core skills within you. And the main skill there is the passion and drive to learn more about whatever the skill is that you're trying to adapt your career to. In that case, it was opening Quark and figuring out what the buttons did, and doing a layout that you anticipate that they will like, and then therefore give you a job. But then there's many other situations, certainly in my career, that I've been put in that position that you go, can you do this? And you've just got to develop a belief and confidence, which is easier said than done, in yourself and your abilities to be able to figure it out in the end. Because by nature, this job, this career is problem solving. It's almost fitting together puzzles and piecing these bits together. You don't know the answer. You don't know the solution to any of these things that clients throw at you. And that's part of the job. You've got to get comfortable in that uncomfortable situation.
I think, yeah, knowing how to feel okay, not feeling okay, that's the key.
Mm.
But yeah, I mean, it's amazing. I wonder how universal is that sort of theme of like, how do you do this? What is it? Can you do this? Yes, of course. We think of like creative people that we are sort of the unique kind, of course. You know, you can't speak about surgeon. Like, can you do a heart transplant? No. I'll give it a go. Let me Google it for a second.
Yeah, there's a limit to winging it. The whole fake it till you make it movement, we'll call it, is taken to an extreme to a certain degree. I think that term, whoever coined it, should probably die a death, really. It's not about faking it. It's just understanding that you will inevitably come from a position of not knowing everything, but the knowledge and solutions are out there, but you've got to go and find them. You can't go into every situation knowing everything. That's the premise of faking it to making it. But yeah, it can't just be, I'm going to start doing this, I'm going to be a brain surgeon, and off we go.
I guess it's different. That sort of that quote, fake it till you make it, it kind of applies more to like creating your own menu when you're working on your own stuff, because as soon as you get employed, you have you sort of shoehorned by some certain sets of requirements, as we need to sort of answer to a job role. And it's like when you do your own thing, it just all of a sudden like the freedom to sort of align with the world is a lot looser, and somehow actually gives us more freedom. Actually, I guess you would agree, like to work it out, because you can get a job and you can fake it for a little bit. I mean, my first proper job, they asked me if I can use a Mac. This is like early 2000s. And I was a PC boy. I was like, of course I can use a Mac. You know, I can use Illustrator or whatever. So I was just literally on my first day, just clicking everything. Whereas if you decide to buy a Mac, and you've never used a Mac, and you decide to start a creative business, no one really cares until you get it wrong and you realize you need to learn a bit more, I suppose. Do you remember when you sort of give yourself, or when you got the term or your title, graphic designer, do you remember how you felt having that title?
I felt great. I remember I fell into this career and at the time didn't think it was a career, like the majority of us didn't think it would ever be a career choice or a viable way of making a living. And at the time, I remember thinking, this is what I do. Oh, yeah, I do this. And we get excited about things that often people are oblivious to, which is the beauty of the industry, is driven on passion that a lot of people don't see and don't realize that everything around them is designed. So, yeah, I think I went through a good period of time of being really excited about being called a graphic designer. Whether or not that's changed, it probably has, that's shaped through. I wouldn't class myself as a graphic designer anymore, and that shifts through your career as you move and shift into different sectors.
I think that the title, I remember how proud I was. I wasn't graphic designer 3 days before I was graphic designer, and I think what was the key was to live and breathe what you do, because not only I was a graphic designer, I had a crappy job, but graphic daytime job just to make sure that the cheap rent is paid, but it was the freelance stuff. Like what's got me on the journey, and sounds like similar, that you grow into your term. Like, of course, to a seasoned graphic designer, you just come across as an idiot. It was like, well, you've been doing it for 5 minutes. How can you be a graphic designer? Whereas I can see now, 20 something years later, when you see someone like saying, I'm an entrepreneur or CEO, I'm a founder and whatever, it doesn't seem misaligned. You're not that person, but you need to believe in yourself being that. And I think that blind conviction, I think that's helped me. I didn't suffer with imposter syndrome. I just suffered with like idiot syndrome, because I was like, look, I'm here. I've got a mouse and a keyboard and a Coral Draw. Let me sort this out, and I remember how proud I was that. And I think that's an interesting sort of belief, because
I share it. I have a very strong memory of when I first landed my job and I could officially call myself a graphic designer. And I remember being in a Wetherspoons of all places in Barnsley, and I was walking up the stairs to go to the bar. I'm a graphic designer. And I actually said them words to myself. It's ridiculous now. I'm suffering from idiot syndrome myself in that scenario. And but I wish I could probably capture some of that excitement, just raw excitement of what's to come. I was so excited and proud. And still am to a degree, but obviously that initial spark of this is a new path completely for me were incredibly exciting. And it's a long time since that moment in Wetherspoons. Maybe I should go back and try and relive it.
I mean, what a fantastic moment. So how old were you then in Wetherspoons? Speaking to yourself, about little rocky moments.
Yes, see me ID. I would have been 19, I think. I'd been 19.
Okay. Is that two days ago or two?
No, that would have been 15 years ago, yeah.
All right. So if you could see yourself, if you were standing next to yourself, your current self and your 19-year-old self, what would you tell yourself and what would you not tell yourself? Because there's the things to look out and things that you need to make, the mistakes you need to make, no, to get through it.
Yeah, it's difficult to look back because, the career that I've had so far has been exactly what I wanted to a certain degree. But I think the major point that I would tell myself is to slow down, be more patient with my approach. That bullish approach has taken me and accelerated my career. But I think I ended up starting a studio at 23 and effectively became a creative director. We built a team, and that I always look back on it and think that might have been a little too young to do that. I lost out on many other years of working in other studios to gain experience, to learn the ropes, really, which I don't ever feel like I ever did in how it should be done. Now, that's a positive and a negative because I've never learned bad traits of how other studios or agencies would do something, but I've had to learn by a lot of failures and hitting the side of the barriers, just like you do when you're bowling, bouncing off them to try and forge a career and forge a way of doing things. And I think at that time, certainly back then, I had a drive to try and succeed, like I do think most do, but just putting the brakes on at that young age to try and develop some of the more core principles and foundations of this career. As to what I wouldn't say is, what did I say?
Would you say something like, would you tell yourself to look out for something? I mean, because you said obviously like you're happy with where you've gone maybe a bit too fast, but would you ever say, you know what, don't do that? that might have been.
I don't think I'd ever have any regret over the choices that I made. There's nothing that I've done majorly that maybe hold on to a few of the earlier positions. I think maybe that is something, but that's something I would tell myself to change, is the earlier jobs that I had that kind of formed the earlier parts of my skill set. As I mentioned, I worked in publishing and I worked there for a good few years. And the situation was I wasn't really aware of the career that we have now, the sector, the branding world, the world that we have. I once my old boss brought in a computer arts magazine, and it opened my eyes to being an independent designer and having you work on these pages and being able to design the front cover of magazines and being able to do all these kind of different projects that are out there in the world. I thought I was going to work in publishing for the majority of my career back then. So maybe if I could change anything, it'd be at that point I moved into a different studio or a studio environment, because I haven't actually ever worked for another studio or agency. I cut my teeth in publishing and then decided I wanted to work independently.
I think everyone's got this journey when they get asked, what would you do differently? And I think our stories, our narratives are so unique that you can tell yourself, you know, I wish I worked for somebody else. But you could have spent easily many years working with people that don't have it exactly right. From our career choices, sometimes we tell ourselves we wish we did something differently or emulated someone else's narrative. But from what you described, like wishing that you worked for other studios and learned from somebody else, I can personally, my testament is that I worked for people who didn't really care, you know, and that was my kick up the arse. And I could, if anything, I got to see how not to do things, if that makes sense, like what to avoid. And yeah, sometimes you have to sort of unlearn and undo and unsee things that you don't necessarily want to carry forwards. And I quite admire that, you know, being sort of creative director at 23, that must have been well exciting. I think you should, I'm sure you've gone back to Weatherspoons and went like, oh, I'm a creative director now. Because you carry yourself differently, obviously, because I remember how proud as Punch I was. But with that journey, I mean, it's quite young. And there's a great Patrick Keelty clip when he says that he was gunning to do a talk show in America. And apparently he gave his tape to David Letterman's agent. And he said, great tape, kid, come back in 15 years when you've lived a little and we'll make a talk show. And I feel like what you described with the Computer Arts magazine and that kind of stuff, it felt there was a lot of work done, but it felt more scaled down, like the channels and information were a bit more unified and a bit more sort of clearer. And I think when you wanted to be featured, you actually had to push yourself a little, like you actually had to fill a criteria. And I think that was pretty much everyone's little battle on, let's get me in creative art, or computer art or digital art or advanced Photoshop. I mean, I remember how those magazines were like the distillery of like, okay, this is what's happening now. And if you made it, you were like, oh my God, this is actually something that is for the right reason. I didn't see those guys as gatekeepers, but they were quality controllers. Whereas I guess now you can plonk anything out on the internet and hope that, you're the superstar of tomorrow. And I think that's quite an interesting thing. So I'm with you on computer arts that kind of, I found those pieces of puzzle kind of unlocked. It was like, oh, that's what I can do with what I'm trying to do. This is a direction. It was exciting times.
I owe a huge debt to it, really, that opened my eyes to a different career path and pushed me. Like I said, I was quite content at the level I was because I thought I was working for the best like paper in the area. Like I was at the top of the tree, but the forest that I was looking at wasn't, a forest. When I discovered the breadth of work that was available to do in that, it pushed me then to get better and learn, and then pushed me ultimately. That wasn't ever going to be my career in publishing. I needed to get out and see things bigger and really attack it. And to do that, I made the decision to do that on my own from day one, which I think I've always had that in me to do. But like I say, it's just, did I have the skills? But you would never have the skills when you go off on your own. You never have them fully formed. You just need to have a little bit more of a plan than probably I did, which was, wouldn't it be a laugh to start a studio? That were it. That was the plan.
That sounds like a brilliant case study, like a business case study. Like, how did you start a studio? Wouldn't it be a laugh if you started a studio?
It would, yeah. And the first day in the studio, me and my best friend started it. And we sat there and drank cider, did a little bit of work, and that were about it. We pushed forward. We just put as heart and soul into it. And then fast forward a couple of years, we ended up doing that lovely full circle moment where I think we ended up designing a couple of the computer arts covers. I know we designed 2 at least, and then got featured in the magazine quite a few times, which, for it to be the catalyst of change in my career, to then be in that were a big moment for me, like a proud moment. It were another Weatherspoons moment.
Barnsley Weatherspoons is the theatre of memories. Oh, fantastic. I think everyone needs to, but I think what you highlighted there, or what you sort of mentioned, is celebrating the little wins, because I don't know about you, but life is moving faster, like I don't know, from the conversations when I speak to students now, like everyone lives in this sort of steroid charged, turboed world where you're expected to be someone or something pretty quickly, or at least that's how we are aligned. And we had a chance of actually taking it easy and be slightly just anonymous in a way. You can create work and fail I just can't pronounce it, and that's the best bit about this. Quietly, no one wouldn't know, anonymously. And yeah, I think just having everything out there in the open and sort of fishing for likes and fishing for, for recognition and acceptance must be quite hard. Yeah, anyone who's listening to this now, should pause back, it's just be honest with your craft, because it's coming. Because looking back at your career, actually 15 years, you got into a deep end with people that you ultimately, you left the studio, like that got dissolved, right? and you went on your own. Sometimes people freelance and they start a studio, and sometimes, people go on their own and join in a position. So now you run Kyle Wilkinson Studio.
Mhm.
So that's very much you're the creative, not only by default, but by name. It's your
Very much.
business. And yeah, I mean, for example, I never had a studio for like partners. I never had a studio partner. I worked for a couple of companies, not even agencies, and I worked for those.
Mhm.
And I kind of went on a mission of just working it out on my own, kind of like, okay, what do you do next? How do you do that thing? And you kind of build your armory and build your toolkit. So when it comes to sort of starting on your own, you didn't start a studio straight away. Is that right? You went freelance first.
No, well, picked up what I could. So just for a bit of context, the studio that I started, we had 5 directors of, and then we initially had 2, and then we brought other people. Well, we merged with another company, and then built the team. Fast forward 6 years of building that, a couple of the directors just didn't want to do it anymore. They wanted to do other things and in other sectors in business. We dissolved the company and disbanded, and I was doing the thing that I wanted to do, which was the biggest disappointment for me, is that I was doing exactly what I wanted to do with some of my closest friends who were still close friends now. And so I had the dream, and it hit me a little bit where, what am I going to do? And I just thought, well, we're going to do it again, but this time it's just going to be me. And hence why I put it under my own name, is that I'd spent 6 years building an equity up in a different name of a studio. And then that kind of went overnight. Your career throws you these curveballs. I never predicted that. And sometimes these curveballs come along in your career that you just got to, again, adapt to, which sometimes that just does take a bit of a steel of resolve and a bit of a head down moment and just a grit that'll get you through and building that resilience. So a lot of people talk about a thick skin in this career, but it's more about building resilience to any curveball that comes your way. It's not about taking criticism on your work. That's natural. That'll come your way. That's always going to be a part of this career. But it's more about building a resilience in yourself and a self-belief that you can push forward. So I took KWS forward with just myself in the intention of trying to replicate some of the success and some of the things that we'd done, but maybe learning from some of the mistakes that we'd made in them previous 6 years, and really trying to continue my career as it was going.
Did you feel like you have sort of identity, sort of not crisis, but identity shakeup, obviously, when you've gone from like a 5-man or sort of multi-personal studio to on your own? And as you said, I mean, unlike others, you were doing what you were enjoying and others were not. I mean, there must have been, I mean, resilience is the right word, because we feel that everyone tells themselves that everything should be easy in life. But if everything was easy in life, it would never go back for the same thing twice, because it'd be far too easy. But I mean, I remember like what you had, and this is what sort of leads me to the next question. I felt like you always had a sort of signature style. I knew that, even though, because at that time, I remember you did lots of typography and sort of typography-led pieces. It had style. And I think it kind of was interesting because you were in sort of Barnsley as opposed to London-centric sort of zone. And you were creating pieces of work that were literally, in my opinion, like actually shaking the narrative, because you didn't feel, I guess, Annie, you should tell me if that's correct, if I've seen it correctly, but it was like, let's have a go. Like, I'm going to create pieces like this. I mean, you had advantage working with laser cutters and creating stuff there. Came out of Gates, which must have been quite a big conversation talk, because, like, I think they were good. And obviously I remember your exhibitions, they were amazing too. So were you ever sort of aware of the fact that you were building like a sort of personal brand of creativity, or like a brand of creativity? How was it conscious, or did you feel like you wanted to step out of like from what others were doing, or was it conscious or unconscious? How did you do it?
Unconscious to start with, really. It was just the drive, and probably an insecurity as well, a deep-rooted insecurity where you're wanting to try and prove yourself by creating different things. So if I create something different that gets talked about, then that's giving me a little more validation. It was completely unconscious, but reflecting back, maybe that was an element or a driving force. But really, it was. And the studio still, my approach now is still to try and be experimental and have some fun, and have some fun is banded around. It's not just turning up to work and everything's all rainbows. It's bloody hard work. trying to do things that have not been done before, or attempting it anyway. And so we got quite a bit of coverage at times, and then won work off the back of it from just doing things that others weren't, and having an aesthetic that was a little more unusual. Some of the work now that's kind of in vogue right now is some of the work that we were doing probably 7 years ago, which is frustrating because you could probably get more money for it now. But it's we just did it purely from a let's push ourselves to see how weird and wonderful of a thing that we can create. And that wasn't just restricted to graphic design. So you mentioned the laser cut in there, and we designed furniture, and the chairs were one of those things that led on to paid projects. When we designed 2 different chairs, we ended up designing the Brand Impact Awards trophies as a result of that. So it kind of came back into our sector of what we knew in the traditional branding and graphics sector.
Yeah, I think you would agree. I mean, it's been great following your journey. I mean, I've seen it pretty much from its inception, from a studio when you went on your own. And it's amazing. I think, again, when you speak to newcomers and students and they're like, what advice would you give, and it's usually like, there's a few questions that always come up, like, what advice would you give to get started, and, how to get work and how to get seen, how to get noticed. And the thing is the same. It's like the same advice as, how do you run a marathon? First you buy shoes, then you get yourself outside, then you walk the mile, then you run the mile, and it's a gradual process, and it's just a bit by bit. How good do you reckon we are actually in taking up advice? Did you have any mentors in your career, or did you have anyone that you looked up to that would give you a steer?
The people that I started the studio with originally, the 4 other guys were the mentors and the inspiration behind pushing us forward, because we all had individual facets and skills that brought something to the table, and a broad age range as well. We had some older guys in there that really knew what they were talking about and had been about the block. So it's more taking inspiration from those around you and surrounding yourself with people around you that could be your peers within the creative sector, or your friends and family that might just encourage you to try and push forward. Take what you can from those that you admire, but don't forget to listen to yourself as well, and really chase what somebody else's dream or life experience is not necessarily relevant to yours. Get on your own pitch and play your own game, and be patient.
I think it sounds like, I mean, I know you said that you wish that you worked for other studios at the beginning, but it sounds like you worked with the right people to show you the things that were complementary skills to yourself, because you may have ended up in a studio with other designers doing other design things. And around that time, I feel like we were just getting to understand how we should be doing the work, because, I mean, let's be honest, like drinking cider and doing a little bit of work was what most studios did at the time. I mean, I know people in London who literally spent the first 10 years in a pub, kind of just making a cheap rent, and that's what they did. But
I think that's the thing, is I put myself and continue to put myself in a position that it's of necessity to grow or to develop those skills. I look back and say, that's the one thing that maybe I would have acquired different things, so I would have learned more. But at the same time, I probably learned more from not knowing and having to know, and being driven to, if this fails, then it's not on anybody else, it's on me. And that's, I learned that from an early age and put myself in that situation. That's not for everybody. Again, that's what I did, and that's what allowed me to grow into it and educate myself further at a much greater speed. And I encourage it, because it does build that resilience. It's not easy. It's not always fun by no means, but it's being uncomfortable is the fastest way to growth. And I think if I'd gone maybe into a position that I were enjoying more the lifestyle of working in a studio rather than the head down, getting the work done and focusing on the career side of it, you'd probably get a little bit more comfortable and maybe stay in those positions for a few more years than you should, especially if your ambition is to start something of your own.
Yeah, I mean, it's interesting. We said being uncomfortable gets you to make progress, and that doesn't always sound like what you want to do. When you say you're going to go on your own, you're going to do these things, and most of them won't feel nice. And I remember making notes for Creativity for Sale for the book when I was writing. And initially I wanted to write it like a comedy show. It's like, hey, this is fun, and this is what happens, and this. And the more I was peeling the layers of memories and notes and stuff, and looking back and looking at, past clients and work, learning how to sell, how to look after, as a sort of an immigrant with a second sort of, I'm speaking English as a second language, which is evidently clear right now, but it can feel really, really daunting. And I remember, as I said, peeling these layers, and I was like, actually, wait a minute. Most of the memories are negative memories. Like most of this is like eating scraps, like going through the mud knee deep, going, is this any good? Like, but when you're in it, you don't necessarily know. So when you look back, you only remember like, okay, well, I've got a bit of portfolio I can show for this. So I can, I've got experience that I can fall back on. You don't always, the negatives stick out better more than the positives, but they're necessary. And I mean, yeah, as you said, like you can be in the studio and stay there for a little bit longer just because you're doing the work. And I find with the studio work, and this is my personal experience, and I'm trying to find something that will prove me wrong, is that in the studio, you don't always get people who necessarily want you to be good. Like they don't want you to grow. Like you can join the studio and hope that people will look after your career path. Whereas running the studio, as you know, yourself, it's you're happy that you've got some time with your kids and you paid all the bills, you keep the show on the road. And I think, have you like, how was your, it's the longest segue ever, by the way, how is your pathway from thinking about employment and going to your self-development? How did you look after your self-development? What was your drive and what was your source of inspiration and learnings?
So for my own self-development is just that constant curiosity. I am blessed with quite a lot of energy. So I use that time as much as possible to try and learn, or not pigeonhole myself as, right, I've done this for one project, I'm going to do this again for another project. And then inevitably you end up doing that again and again and again. Always try to come at it from a different perspective. Another big inspiration for that, though, is the mortgage. You've got to stay ahead of it, and you can't really pretend otherwise. That you put yourself in a position where you have to make this work, and then that will naturally push you forward. It's sink or swim moments that you must try and get yourself in, but strategically try and put yourself in as well. If you're in a studio now working, don't just try and get your head down doing the work. Focus on how you can. I've always tried to learn from other people as much as I can, no matter what career they're in. So if you're in a studio now, a lot of people on client service, a lot of the creative teams hate client services because they often tell them what to do. They often tell them how to deliver a brief. Learn from them. That could be learning not how to do it, or try and see the skills that the client services team are bringing to the table, because they have a job for a reason. Rather than like keeping your distance away from them, which is easy done, try and learn from them, even though it's a completely different skill set that's relatable to your current position. You don't know what you can take from them people to then what will then actively help you start your own studio or business. And it's always trying to see what others are doing and learning from them, because you don't know everything. I don't know everything. You will never know everything. But there's often, if you have that network there that you can feed off or ask or discuss, or just try and learn from, observe people, and that doesn't just mean other designers within the world. It's, if you just look at the same design blogs, if you just look at the same things on Pinterest, it's this, inevitably the output will be very similar. Just as much as if you try and learn from the same people, you're going to learn the same things, which you probably will already know. It's just more building your confidence and trust in your own voice from a design perspective. How can you then develop your creative career? Look elsewhere.
Mention a motivator, which we have a same motivator in our life, which is the mortgage, the fear of the mortgage, fear of the bank. I read in a book by Jimmy Carr that he was lucky that he didn't buy a house at 25, because he just did what he did. He wasn't sort of, he left his job and did what he did. And it could be more fluid. I think he moved back in with his mum, or I mean, I might have it all wrong, but he decided not to get chained down. Obviously, I'm sure now he's got more than a mortgage now. But sometimes that insecurity, the financial insecurity, makes us take on jobs that we shouldn't work on. Is that right? Have you ever taken jobs because of the money, and did it go well?
Yes and no. We all will take those jobs, but it's just try and avoid them where possible. But it's easy to say that, isn't it? If you're in a situation where you don't afford yourself, you can't afford it, then you must take the job. But what you've got to realize is that you've got to afford yourself the space to develop your career. So that's not necessarily filling your time with pretending to be busy or looking to be busy just to pay the bills. If you can give yourself some space and time through a financial buffer, through saving, or not buying the latest bit of crap that you don't inevitably need. A lot of people at the minute are driven by, everybody wants a Rolex these days. Everybody's driven by buying all these shiny things. Don't buy them. Invest in your career. Give yourself that, afford yourself that time and luxury to be able to develop the things that you want to, so that you'll inevitably start working on the things that you want to pay the bills, rather than just taking money jobs. And then in turn, you will be far, far, far more happier in life day to day than just look at this shiny thing I've got in the car park or on my wrist or on. It's not to say don't go and chase your dreams. If you really want something, go and get it, but make sure you understand why you're buying it. And if it's to impress others, then it's often a bad buy. But then that will fuel you to your unhappiness by taking jobs that you don't necessarily need. And I know, I appreciate that people don't just take jobs for the money just to buy a Rolex. It's obviously to get by, and that shouldn't be frowned upon. But it's just trying to avoid it where possible. I do it, and will inevitably do it in the future at some point as well. It's just it's learning from it and trying to avoid it where possible.
I mean, I don't know who you hang out with, but the Rolex crew sounds interesting.
The guy who cuts me hair's got a Rolex. It's like everybody's got a Rolex. Yeah.
Yeah, I don't know anyone like that, which is interesting. So with your identity, like we touched on it earlier, with a personal brand or like a studio brand, obviously with the design industry, we're quite guilty of not practicing what we preach. We are, the sans serif type in the top left of our website, sort of substitute as a logo. But do you, in the way of getting clients, because I mean, there's these golden $1 billion questions, how do you get clients and what does everyone charge? Mm-hmm. Did you ever sort of make, obviously physically you have done with your chairs and your furniture stuff, which was, in my opinion, very much the best promotional work you can do, because you don't need exactly a shiny business card, because you can just plonk a chair in the middle of the room and says, here I am, I've arrived. How do you, and if you do, like, promote the studio, obviously, what would you do to attract new clients? Like, how do you try to assert your own voice in the narrative of what's out there?
I think the often overlooked one is looking at your network of people that you already know and trying to tap them up and say, I'm looking to expand the business. I'm looking to acquire some new clients in this sector. Do you know anybody who's looking? And that's one that's often overlooked, is looking at your own network, that you should try and lean on a little more. Talk to the people, and they'll inevitably know somebody that's maybe mentioned something in the pub or while they're around at their house that they will then put you in front of. Word of mouth is still very strong in this business. So lean on your network. But really, self-initiated projects are often, I know both of us have had the benefit of doing self-initiated projects and having success from them. And it will always be the thing that tends to gather more work or more exposure on and eyes on your work, purely because you will put everything into it, because you have free reign, you have that passion for it, and you will stay up and do the late nights and early mornings on something that you put your heart and soul into. So I think that self-initiated work is don't half-arse it, make it the best thing that you've done, and try and do something that's not been done before, or try and develop something that truly expresses what you want to work on. In my case with the chairs, obviously wasn't intended to really get the job of chief chair designer anywhere, if that exists anywhere, but it were more just to demonstrate when I say the studio thinks differently and takes a different approach, we can back that up by we've done this and we've done that, which is not necessarily applicable to your project, but we will bring a different thinking to your project. And we can show that, because with just words, why should we work with you? Well, we approach things differently. It's just words. It's just back it up. So try and craft your brand, whatever that is, whatever it is that you're into. Focus on those things that really bring the joy and passion in your career and life, then back it up. Create the projects that will back it up. That doesn't necessarily need money. That just needs creativity. Often the best projects are through a lack of budget. It's not because you have to think more creatively around them and the end product. So it's not just typical Yorkshireman saying it's not about the money, but it's about the ideas.
I have to say, I mean, I fully agree with you. I have to say that a self-initiated project and showing work per se, it's ultimately the tool that will amplify your voice without you needing to say too much about it, because you can be in a verbal pitch and do your mission statement or brand statement or elevator pitch, and people can be intrigued. But what will make them pull the trigger or actually getting you on board is actually proof of your previous work. And I'm now being on the other side of actually commissioning people. After many years as an illustrator and designer, now I commission people, and I totally understand the pattern. Like, I like what you created there because it made me feel something. If there's something in your work that I would like to not necessarily replicate with the work, but the feeling, like you're thinking, like, where can we go with it further? And yeah, the advice of personal projects is you will never get bigger scope and freedom in actually expressing yourself if you treat it like a alignment of a commercial project. Because lots of people I've seen, I've heard and spoken to, I think the empty constraints or the open constraints, or the lack of constraints, shall I say, make it difficult for them to say, like, oh, what shall I do? And I just came back from Canada a few days ago from a conference, and somebody said, I believe there's a book in me, but I don't know what it's about, what it's going to come to you. Like, it's wanting to go into this conversation, like, okay, there is something there, but I don't know what it's about. And it takes years sometimes to actually realize what is your true expression, what is your true, a meaning, or what is the true feeling that you're trying to evoke in people, because it takes years to actually get that, because you can be emulating people left, right, and center and actually just be replicating, which is fine. As we know, like musicians, start playing covers by Jimi Hendrix or whoever, like that. That's how you get your finessing. But I think getting started, I mean, if it feels right, I mean, if you feel like you're going to do it till 3 o'clock in the morning, that means you're doing something right. That's your flow state. Mm-hmm. That's something. And I don't think there's ever sort of chance in pushing it. Okay, I need to push out some pieces just to be there. So yeah, I think your personal and sort of self-initiated work was great. And from your studio that seems to be quite established now, and it's going strong, you've been working on your own personal projects again as a painter out of all disciplines.
Yeah, that was the next thing that I'd not tackled. I wanted to paint. And it came through, I did it as a bit more of a hobby. I often find that you get stuck doing a lot of work because this job naturally is more on the hobby side of, it becomes part of your life. So your hobbies are often involve the creative sector. So you might want to go to galleries or go to the, put yourself in creative spaces, whether that's the theatre, going to see films, and you often end up talking about typefaces, how something's lit and so on. So I wanted to try and do something that was more relaxing and something that were a breakaway, but that were closely linked. So I started painting and started making art, and quickly the hobby side of it went out of the window, and I wanted to build it into an addition to my career path. And that's why I'm wanting to, I get frustrated sometimes that the accessibility to some things in the north is not as good as it is in the south. So some of the things that I would want to see in a gallery, I don't often get the opportunity to because I'm up here, and that annoys me. So my next thing, what I'm wanting to do is open a gallery up here, and hence why I've started painting, that I want to fill it with my work, and then fill it with others as well in time when I figure out how to do that. I've no experience or idea what I'm doing. So I'm trying to apply the same things that I've talked about with starting a studio to pushing into a completely different facet of the creative sector to see where that might take me. So, and I'm launching my first public exhibition over the next couple of months. So yeah, it's exciting. It's a new beginning.
I mean, is this the world exclusive to be told that you are planning to start a gallery?
Yeah,
That's brilliant news.
yeah, it is. It's one of the things that that's the intent behind it now, is that I found that I really enjoy it, creating the work, and I see it as another extension of what I do for clients. But I'm trying to almost, I think this is one thing from my career ambition is I build these brands for other companies. I build brands for other people. I want to build my own, and that's kind of the intent, to provide a gallery space that would be less pretentious, something that's a little bit more accessible to all, and something that's a little bit more fun. For me, art should be fun. It seems to be taken. It is a serious thing, but I think it becomes there's barriers there through people getting asked, how does it make you feel? Now, art can evoke emotions and it can do all that, but sometimes you can just enjoy it. Sometimes you can just have something on your wall that you go, I love that, and I absolutely adore it, and it's one of my favorite things that I own, or it's the favorite thing that I've looked at this month, and you can just go and visit it. And it should just be as it can be as simple as that. And I want to create something that's a little bit more of an experience and a bit more fun for somebody visiting the gallery. So that's the intent. Yeah. So I don't think I've said that to anybody. So yeah, this is the world exclusive.
I mean, dude, I absolutely love your idea, honestly, of the philosophy behind it, because getting into galleries, like it's a gatekept world, like it's pretty much, if you don't know people, I speak from tiny speck of a personal experience when, we were all producing digital illustrations and there were sort of places popping up and selling limited edition prints, and, the saturation thing. I just look at it from, let's say, from like the book perspective model, like not from the bookshop model, where you wish that everyone self-published could just put a book in Waterstones on the shelf, but that Waterstones would be bigger than the whole high street, because there's a level, there's a reason why there's quality controllers, like what would you bring to your gallery? Like, do you have a space? So I can understand the traditional model, but giving people a chance to be seen and kind of just getting like that little sort of leg up in the industry or leg up in visibility is sometimes something that can make people make or break their career, especially we really should help them, because it's an interesting list. Like we have a fewer gatekeepers for so many things, your proof of like starting a gallery, starting painting, doing things what you like, put them online, being seen, being sold. You haven't till this point, you have actually needed a gallery to be there to sell your work. Like we have bypassed, all of that. But it takes us back to the element of like, okay, do we need to create a traditional experience, as you mentioned yourself? Like, that's where the people are known to sort of enter this point of experience. So, I mean, I think it's a fantastic idea. And I have tried in the past, have a gallery show with like ambitious gallery show with like headphones and playing music, sort of visuals based on the music. And I haven't felt imposter syndrome many times in my life. As I said, idiot syndrome was definitely a lot more prevalent, but you brush in against the society, or a layer of society that you don't necessarily know, and how they think and how they appreciate things. And I think that cross-pollination is extremely important, because we learn from one another, but it can also feel daunting, because why would they need to listen to us, and why would we need to listen to them in a way? So, as you know, I'm a big believer in creating your own reality, inventing your own dream future, and going, that's the plan. So in terms of your painting, I mean, it was great to hear that you said that's your sort of therapeutic stuff, because again, like when you're trying to find your outlets, when you try to do things and you're like, okay, the universe is telling me I should be doing X, Y, Z, whereas you pick up your brush and one thing leads to another. So what's the plan with the collection? I mean, looking at a brilliant piece behind you. What's the plan with the collection, and kind of where did you develop that aesthetic? Because you seem like, to the world of online, you seem like you've stumbled across the aesthetic pretty much straight away.
No, it took a while. No, so I've wanted to do a portrait series for quite some time. So the initial collection that we're launching at Santander's new headquarters in Milton Keynes is called Pop Cult. And so it's more about how we are still fixated, our gaze is still fixated on these 20th century pop culture icons, such as your Audrey Hepburn's, your Marilyn Monroe's, Elvis. And a lot of people now going through have not seen some of these films that Audrey Hepburn might be in. they don't know an awful lot about them, but we still hold them on a pedestal of being an icon, and they thrill us. We love them for whatever it is that they did. So the first gallery show is going to be 7 new originals, and one of them is going to be of Alan Turing. One of them is of Alan Turing, should I say? And we did that. I've done that just so that he worked at Bletchley Park on the code breakers in World War II, which is right for the area. So I wanted to do this aesthetic where do we really know them? The faces shift slightly as they're repeated, and it's my take on pop art. So I've created this concept called Pop Cult, which is going to be the first collection, and then we've got the second show lined up already for next year, which is more based around social media, which is going to be interesting. But I'll leave that as a bit of a tease. But the aesthetic on this, they took quite a while to develop, and that came through me experimenting in the studio. So it was, I don't know what I'm doing, and that gives you that youthful kind of ignorance to any of the techniques or ways that you would do something through a traditional, how would you pick up and paint this? Well, I'm going to figure out how I do it. What's my process of making these things? And that often is born through those new beginnings where you don't know what you're doing. And that's why I often put myself in those situations, because it pushes your work forward, where you have to figure it out. You have to figure a solution out. And that has been the thread that goes throughout the whole studio's work over the years. And that's why we've done some things that people tend to like, which is nice. But the aesthetic, yeah, by no means it's no overnight success. There's been a lot of time planning this, probably 18 months, maybe 2 years of trying to just come up with the concept. So the gallery and the store's called House of Thrills. So I don't want to go under a pretentious this gallery name. It's just House of Thrills. And these things are going to be exciting, and they're going to be something that's a little bit more fun and different for your walls and for sculptures that will sit in your homes. And that concept and the brand and the whole thing has took a long time to develop. So yeah, by no means it's an overnight success. And I pitched it to a client. We didn't just rock up and get it into Santander's headquarters, pitched it, and we saw an opportunity to get there in their new building that they're opening. And thankfully we got an awful lot of luck in getting in there. So I'm excited to launch them there. It's going to be good.
So if you were to see yourself again at Wetherspoons in your age 19, I guess from this conversation, I picked up on quite a few adjectives or quite a few sort of traits and qualities that you have to sort of, talk about resilience, talk about patience, talk about, drive. Isn't it quite sometimes interesting when you look back and you're like, I wouldn't know how the story unfold. I wouldn't know like where I'm going from this. I never thought I would be writing anything, let alone making books out of it. But from everything that you had to learn, what did you not expect to needing to learn the most, and what you glad that you learned the most too? So like, what did you needed to learn, and what you glad that you could do more of?
The thing I've already touched upon is patience and reflection, giving yourself the credit sometimes. I find that very difficult to do. I find that you talked about celebrating those little wins. Learning to do that sometimes is key, because I think we're susceptible to it in this industry, just because we often think about the ideas of tomorrow, the things that we dream up for as clients are often thinking about the next things that's coming down the line. And we don't sit in the now. We live in the tomorrow, which is part of the beauty of this career. But sometimes just pausing and seeing how far you've come from 19-year-old me learning all about this industry and going on that big discovery that people use the word journey too much and the word discovery too much, but reflecting back on those years sometimes is a healthy thing to do and a really enjoyable point. So I would probably try and learn. I'm glad that I've learned to do that a little more, but I wish I'd learned to do that sooner. And I suppose the one thing that I'm glad of learning, or glad that I could learn, is that my career didn't have to be London centric. Now London gets a lot of bashing. It doesn't deserve it at times. And then sometimes it does. But I think going into this career, I did always have a bit of a hang up that I couldn't do it where I'm from, or I couldn't succeed in it, should I say. I'll always hit a ceiling. And I think that the thing that I'm really glad that I've discovered and learned is that you can do this from the walls now are coming down. There's more work to be done, but that success is there if you grind at it. And it's one of those that the barriers are getting lower, and that if you put the work in, you can do that. And that's been an amazing thing to learn. I'm not saying I've had it particularly difficult or tough, but I didn't see it as an option for me right at the start of my career. It wasn't a thing that I could possibly do, and my eyes were opened, and I learned that you can, which is great. And hopefully others will take note of that and take comfort in it.
I'm a big fan of the quote, be so good that they can't ignore you. And I think you've absolutely proven the fact that it doesn't matter where you live, how you do it, if you're honest with yourself and you do it for the right reason, especially for your soul, rather than, you know, necessarily needing to pay mortgage. It takes you to marvelous places that you never expected. So, Kyle, thanks for coming on the show. For the context, for anyone who's made it this far in this conversation, Kyle and I speak about every 3 months on the phone for about an hour, which the conversation luckily are never recorded. And we try to sort of encourage each other and going further. So thanks for coming on. It's been a pleasure. It's been great to hear your story. Kind of just try to throw you a bit of a wobble on getting you back to your past and see how, make sure that you know and see how far you've come and that you appreciate it. Because been fun, big fan of what you've been doing. I think you're doing great work. And I think especially that pivot of what you're doing right now and sort of adding yourself extra work by doing, painted pieces and styles in the gallery. I think it's something that will open you many doors. So thank you very much. And I'll speak to you very soon.
My pleasure, mate. Thanks a lot. It means a lot coming from you to say something like that. So it means a lot. Thank you very much. And I'll see you in Wetherspoons, yeah?
I'll see you there. Barnsley. Cheers. Bye. Thank you for listening to this episode of Creativity for Sale podcast. The show was produced and presented by me, Radim Malinic. Editing and audio production was masterfully done by Neil Mackay from 7 Million Bikes Podcasts. Theme music was written and produced by Robert Summerfield. If you enjoyed this episode and would like to support the podcast, please subscribe and leave a rating or review. To get your own action plan on how to start and grow a life-changing creative business, you can get a copy of Creativity for Sale book via the links in show notes. As always, keep those creators' fires burning, and until next time, I'm Radim Malinic, your guide through this exploration of passion, creativity, innovation, and the boundless potential within us all.